For those of you who don't know, I'm Brandon Dove. I'm one of the co-founders of Pixel Jar, and I get to be a host for this evening and welcome you all here for tonight. We don't have any super special announcements of events coming up because we're all locked in our houses and can't go anywhere. But besides that, we get to see each other here, which is great every month. Our meetup here in Orange County has 4 meetups, 3, 4, 3, I think now. We've got this one, which is the developer meetup. It's the second Monday of every month. We have a design meetup, which is focused still around WordPress, but it's the first Monday of every month. And then we have a general meetup, which is more for, questions, really open forum, covering all spectrums of WordPress, very new users as well as people who have been around for a really long time. And that is the 4th Monday of every month. So definitely encourage you to take a look and join in on any of those, if depending on your interests. Obviously, I'm a developer, so that's why I'm super interested in this one here. We've been running this for quite a while. I think our meetup goes back to 2009. So we've been around for quite a while. We cover a broad range of topics here, but we're in the middle of a series. This is our second step of the series, where we're talking about Headless Wordpress. If you've been around the WordPress space for a while, you may have been hearing about this headless thing. And last month we had Jason Ball speak on WP GraphQL. So it was a really great talk on the details of how to use that. We got really, really deep. I did not record last month, unfortunately. So I automatically recorded this one. Yeah, I know I'm terrible. I apologize for that. But this month we are automatically recording, so I won't forget. And I'll just make that a standing order for myself in the future because I can't be trusted. But it's great to see so many faces. I think that that speaks to the quality of our speaker tonight, which will be Matt Landers from WP Engine. We'll be talking about Headless WordPress, obviously, but in terms of maybe what WP Engine's offering in this space, and also we'll be able to see kind of what they're working on over there. Before we get jumped into that, though, we usually like to spend a little bit of time getting to know each other. It's a different group of people than always, so it's good to see where everybody's at. Maybe help Matt level set a little bit to where the audience is, and get a sense of what's going on. So I'm just going to go again. I'm going to try to go top to bottom in my participants list, but you know how it shifts all over the place. So if I miss you, feel free to raise your hand and say hey. So we'll start with Andre. You want to say hello and what you do with WordPress?
Yeah, hi guys. I'm a former art director for Bazaar Magazine, and I used to be the senior web developer for Danny Ash of Danny's Hard Drive. So I'm very heavy into development. Started out with Dreamweaver and writing code, and now I switched over to WordPress, which I'm very, very happy with. I mean, it's just an incredible platform, does all the heavy lifting. So I'm, thankful for the amount of time I spent with the Adobe people in order for me to be able to drill down into WordPress and do things that I'd like a template or a website for a client to work for.
Very cool. Welcome. Adam, we'll go with you next.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name's Adam. I am a front-end developer at Pixel Jar. So previously, I'd done teaching and like a lot of PHP. I'd done WordPress about 3 years ago. So now I'm jumping back into WordPress and trying to relearn everything and understand how everything works to make it easier for everyone. So yeah, just excited to learn more, especially about Headless WordPress, because that I did a deep dive this weekend. And yeah, it seems like a lot of fun.
Awesome. Thanks for coming. All right. So next we have Asim.
Hi, this is Asim here. I'm and I have been working with for approximately 2 years now. My original background is that I have worked in IT team for banks, and I'm more of a developer kind of a person. and I prefer to write more code than using more plugins.
I like it. Sounds good. Thanks for coming. Next up is Brian. Brian, I think you're muted there. All right, we'll come back to you.
Are we okay now? Okay.
Yep, got you.
I don't know what happened, but
No worries.
and anyhow, I'm Brian Scanlon. I've been a developer for like 30 years. Been in the last 5 years, been doing a lot of PHP and trying to go and work my way into WordPress. So that's about it.
Cool. Welcome. Next, we've got Elizabeth. You have a mic tonight, Elizabeth?
Yeah. Hi.
Cool.
I'm Elizabeth. I'm Dev. I'm just getting used to this time change thing with the days shorter. It just seems like kind of like midnight for some reason tonight, or maybe because of colder weather. I don't know. But anyway, it's good to be here, and thanks for hosting this meetup.
Sure. Welcome. Next is Eric.
So I'm Eric. I'm here in Dallas, Texas. I've been doing WordPress for, I don't know, longer than I care to remember. I think 2009 timeframe.
Nice.
I run a group here in Dallas, developer, specialize in security and email deliverability.
Cool. Well, welcome. Evan, long time no see.
Yeah, no kidding. It's nice to be back. My name is Evan Goss. I'm a web developer at UC Irvine. And part of that, I support, 2 or 3 WordPress sites. Not really my forte or primary responsibility, but I do have 2 or 3 sites on the side that I am helping manage as well. And that's it.
Cool. Welcome. Greg, I think you're up next.
Thank you. My name is Greg Trobow. I live here in Tustin, and I run a help support desk for a company called Two Rockstars. And I've got a couple of huge projects that I'm going to be working on with WordPress using multi-site. And I'm still working on, exactly how I want to get everything working. So I'm looking forward to learning a bit. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, welcome. Jacob, you're up next.
Hey ho, what's happening? I am Jacob from. I've got my Zeke sweater on today.
Whoa!
Hey, it's official. I'm a developer at Zeke Interactive. I love stuff with Headless WordPress. I've been doing a lot of stuff with Next.js and Gatsby, whether it's just a plain old marketing site or e-commerce with Woocommerce as well. So really interested in the space. Really enjoy working in the space. So happy to hear about WP Engine's offering. So pretty excited to be here.
Cool. Thanks for coming, man.
You.
Jim, you're up next.
Here, this is Jim. I'm from Orange, good old beautiful Orange. I own a company that specializes in wedding expos. So it sucks right now. Been a long time developer. I think I wrote my first program in '74. Used to be all API first, then it was, WordPress first. Now it looks like with Headless, it's going to be API WordPress first. So yeah, looking forward to it.
Nice. Thanks, Jim. John, you're up next.
Hi, guys. John D. I specialize in behavior-driven development and unit testing for WordPress. I've been doing a lot of API work lately, too. So it's caught my eye.
Cool. Welcome. Mark, you're up next.
Hey, this is Mark. I've been a developer for about 15 years, and I've been using WordPress since about 2012, and I'm just looking to learn more about Headless WordPress.
Cool. Welcome. Ross, you're up next.
I call myself a developer, but I just work on my own WordPress site and here to learn.
Cool. Welcome. Sean, you're up next.
Hi, I'm Sean. I work on WooCommerce stores Quite a number. Some days it feels like too many that I'm working on, especially at one time. It's been a busy year. But anyway, having fun with that. Have not really got much into headless. However, it is interesting. I'm not so sold on it anyway for a total front end job, so to speak. But I do think there's some really good use cases for e-commerce when we get into the admin area, certain integrations, and some multi-channel, like sales funnel kind of stuff. I think there could be some really interesting cases there. So I want to learn about it. And I really want to learn about WP Engine. I've worked with a number of hosts and I've only done a few minor things with them. I just signed up and it just got approved today to be a quote agency partner, although I don't know that I'm much of an agency, but so anything I could glean there would be great.
Cool. Okay, Sylvia, you're up next. Maybe she doesn't have a...
She's on her phone, so...
Yeah, well, maybe I'm muted on her phone. Either way, we'll come back just in case. Tom, you're up last.
Hi there. My name's Tom Nicolosi. I'm live in South Orange County in Mission Viejo. I'm a engineer and developer, and
Cool.
currently freelance right now. So
all right, sounds good. Actually, Dave, I'll go with you.
Who?
You.
Oh,
yeah.
I'm Dave Margowski. I'm the account manager / project manager for PixelJar, and I'm not a developer, but I am the guy who is watching the chat in case you guys have questions for our presenter tonight. And I'm happy to forward those along.
Cool. And that's a great segue, Dave. I appreciate that. Last but certainly not least is Matt Landers. Please introduce yourself and your topic, and we'll get started here.
All right. Yeah, I'm Matt Landers. I'm in developer relations at WP Engine, which we're still kind of figuring out what that's going to be. But before that, I was a technical architect on our Headless platform, which will be launching early 2021. And tonight I'm excited to talk a little bit about what that is, because I started it out and I started building it. Now there's a lot of people around it and team, and just want to tell you guys all about what we're doing.
Cool. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and spotlight your video. Excuse me. Whoa. I'm going to go ahead and spotlight your video so that it's you. If you're going to be sharing screens, I'm sure it will take over and chaos will ensue. But once this is all done, I will again get this recorded video up on the Meetup group. I'll also get it on our Facebook group if you're not a member of the Facebook group and you'd like to be. If you just search for OC WordPress on Facebook, you will find it. It is a closed group, so just request access and we'll get you guys all entered in there. But for now, I think that's it. Again, if you have questions, use the chat. I don't think there's QA on here anymore, so just use the chat and Dave and I will pick it out. So with that, we'll let you take it away.
All right. Let me go ahead and just share my screen. I have a few slides. I won't slide you to death because I know that nobody wants these slides. So let's see. It's not showing me my window, but let's see what happens here. Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah, we're good.
Got it. Look at this beautiful slide here. All right, if there's anything in the chat, let me know. But also, let's keep this pretty interactive. Ask questions, whatever comes up. I know this will be pretty new for a lot of people if you haven't done Headless WordPress before or Headless in general. But like I said, I'm Matt Landers. I'm over developer relations at WP Engine, and I was working on our Headless product, which I'm going to talk a little bit about. But I think the first thing that I want to mention is what is Headless. I think that that's a good place to start in case you haven't actually heard what Headless is. So a few years ago, WordPress introduced the REST API into the platform. And that really opened up the possibility for different ways to use WordPress. Traditionally what you would do is have a theme, you create your theme, that's how you'd render your front end. It's all in PHP, it's server-side rendered. And you could have some jQuery or JavaScript that might run on the front end, but most of your JavaScript was purely front-end JavaScript. But now with the REST API, we can actually offload the rendering from WordPress somewhere else. And you're starting to see a lot of people do this. You're also seeing a lot of other CMSs pop up that do this as well. So there's this whole category of CMSs called Headless Cmss. And really, the REST API allows WordPress to act like a headless CMS. There's some caveats to that, in that a lot of the things that you're used to working in WordPress aren't going to work anymore. Like a theme isn't going to work anymore. A lot of plugins aren't going to work anymore. And the reason for that is that the themes expect WordPress to do the rendering. So they expect server-side PHP to run and then render HTML to the browser. And plugins, a lot of plugins expect to do something on the front end as well. So if it's a backend plugin that's only doing things with like authoring workflows or whatnot, those won't be affected. Those will still work in headless. But anything that would be expect to do something on the front end, like maybe a social sharing plugin or anything that expects to render something to the user on your site, is no longer going to work the way you would expect it to work. But a lot of the things in WordPress will work pretty well, like editing posts and pulling the data out, custom post types if you use those, which we'll talk a little bit about tonight. So you are able to get a pretty good experience out of Headless, out of WordPress with Headless. And some of the main reasons that people might use Headless, I think that's a good thing to speak to too, because right now I just told you, all right, if you go headless, you're going to lose everything that WordPress does. And that doesn't sound too great, right out of the box. So why would anyone do this? Well, the reason is that a lot of people are using WordPress in enterprise environments now in large sites that require either lots of integrations or very high scalability requirements. So imagine a WordPress site that gets 100 million hits a month. That's going to be pretty difficult to scale in WordPress world, because you got WordPress not only handling the back end of the data management and the database, reads, writes, updates, all of that. You've also got PHP having to render. So that's a lot of processing power that the server's having to do. And when you do all that on one box, since WordPress can't scale out, we can only scale up one box as high as we can. We run into some limitations there. So what you'll see is a lot of people using Headless WordPress for performance reasons. So you can definitely get a much faster site and a much more scalable site if you go headless. Another reason would be security. So a lot of enterprises are worried about WordPress being on the internet. And there's ways with Headless where we can keep WordPress kind of off the internet and allow only our front end to speak to the API and not just any browser. So we can really make WordPress secure that way by just not allowing anyone to ever get to it. Another reason that people are looking at Headless, especially developers, are just the developer experience that you can get if you go and build your front end with some of these more modern frameworks like React or Vue, Gatsby. And that's really, I'd say that that's a huge driver as well. So you have some sites that just require Headless because they need to perform and scale. You have some where security matters, or where security always matters, but where security is paramount and you want to take advantage of that. And the other one is just developers are learning JavaScript, they're learning React and all these frameworks, especially new developers, and they expect to be able to use those frameworks and integrations on the front end to build their sites. So that's kind of like an overview of Headless and its benefits. And now let's talk about what Headless means at WP Engine. So if you don't know who WP Engine is, WP Engine is a WordPress host, one of the largest in the world. We're a managed host. So we've been hosting WordPress for over 10 years now. We can do everything from like shared plans where you're just, like your typical, what you would expect from a WordPress host, all the way up to dedicated boxes that you have with as much power as you would need out of a WordPress instance. So for our headless offering, we're not changing anything about the way that we do WordPress right now. It's still, you get a WordPress box just like you're used to, whatever you need for your scalability requirements. And then the issue that we've had is that when someone goes headless, they need an execution environment for their front end. So if you have a React app that builds with Webpack and maybe has a Node backend with some API endpoints or whatnot, you need to be able to run that somewhere, and you can't run it on your WordPress box. So what we've done at WP Engine is created a new headless platform to allow you to run node-based apps and host them at WP Engine. So no longer do you have to have your WordPress site hosted at WP Engine and then your Node app hosted somewhere else. You can host everything at WP Engine all at once. And then I have just a couple slides here kind of showing an overview of what this platform looks like and how it works. These are actually the slides that I use to onboard people onto our alpha platform, so might be some weird context here. But if you see this diagram on the right, the browser at the top comes into the WP Engine environment. And then based on your routing rules or however your front end is written, the browser will either talk directly to the Node environment, which is what it would do to like load your React app up or your Vue app or whatnot. And then the browser could talk directly to WordPress through GraphQL or the REST API to pull data out of WordPress. Or it could go through the Node environment and talk to WordPress that way. So you could kind of have like a proxy and bypass there. And this is also where you would do other things in your APIs. If you have integrations into like a CRM like Salesforce or HubSpot, or maybe you have an e-commerce site that's either WooCommerce or Shopify or BigCommerce, your Node environment is where you could do a lot of those integrations. So you might have API endpoints there that do some of those integrations. And that's where, if you wanted to talk to third-party APIs, this is where you would kind of hide your API keys because you don't want to put those in the browser. Those need to come from somewhere. You can imagine how you might be able to use this environment for that. And then our typical WordPress environment is where you get your own box. So you can FTP into the box, you can get pushed, you can SSH. There's a lot of different ways that you can communicate with your and deploy to your WordPress environment. But our Node environment is going to be different. So you don't get a box, you don't just buy a certain size box, whatever that might be. It's more of an opaque environment in that we deploy your code for you into a serverless environment where we can scale that horizontally based on the amount of load that you're getting. So the way that we do that is that we do it through GitHub. So you will have a repo, it will connect it to your to our platform. And then once it's all connected and up and running, whenever you push to that repo, we pull your code down, we build it, and then we run it in our environment. So that all happens automatically. You get your own kind of CD pipeline there. All right. And if there's any questions, obviously just speak up and I'm happy to answer them as we go.
Hey, Matt.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was talking to someone last week at WP Engine about this. And so currently right now you're supporting GitHub only. Are there any other potential platforms that you're looking at for hosted Git solutions to integrate with this?
Right now we're just doing GitHub, and if you have GitLab or Bitbucket or something, private repos are free on GitHub now. So you could add a second remote to your Git repository, and then whenever you wanted to deploy, you would just push to GitHub. Okay. Now we're thinking about in the future to support other platforms, but right now it's just GitHub.
And this will work with private repos as well.
Correct. Yes.
Cool.
Yeah, most people are going to be using a private repo. All right. So let's talk a little bit about what it looks like at WP Engine. So at WP Engine, if you're a customer, you've probably seen this before, but in the WordPress environment, we have sites which have environments. So a site is like mysite.com, mattlanders.com, let's say. And then my environments are production, staging, dev, or whatnot. On the node side, we have the concept of an app, and it has environments as well. So the environments would match up one-to-one with what your site has. So if you have a production environment on the WordPress side on the site, then you would probably have a production environment on the app side. So at the app level, you just create your name. So what is the name of this app? You know, mattlanders.com maybe. And then I have a repo. That's going to be the repo to my in GitHub. So whatever repository that is that I want to hook up to this app. And then the environments, you have a name like production or whatnot, but then you hook an environment up to a branch. So I might have my production environment hooked up to my main branch. I might have a dev branch for my development environment, staging, etc. So then what happens is the platform starts to watch those branches. So whenever a change happens in those branches, we pull down the code and deploy it to that particular environment. And then the environments can also have secrets. So secret is just an environment variable, but we call it a secret so that you know that, hey, these are things that you don't want shared outside of the server side. So this could be like API keys to talk to Stripe or to any third-party services that you're integrating into your app that you want to route through the node environment. One common use case for a secret, which isn't really that secret, is that since you have different environments like production, staging, dev, you're going to want to potentially have a different WordPress URL for each of those environments as well. So I might have I want my dev environment to point to my dev WordPress. I want my staging environment to point to staging, etc. And then the environment will have an ID that's generated after we create the app.
Is since it's a node environment, it's just like a full node environment. Jacob was asking if he can run his Next.js app on it.
Yes, so we support if you can npm install it, it's probably going to work. Haven't found anything that hasn't worked yet. I'm sure there are some like native code crazy npm packages that won't work, but I've put it through a good bit of stuff and it's worked. So Next.js is my favorite framework. I use that for all of my sites. So yeah, that's like my primary use case. If I'm going to write a site, I use Next.js. I think it's great.
Okay.
So we're really recommending that. And then there's also other frameworks as well, like Frontity is a framework, headless framework. I think that they're going to come speak at this at some point.
I think in December next month.
Yeah, so Frontity is another JavaScript framework where they've kind of built it around the WordPress scenario. But then you can just use Express, which is like tried and true Node original framework. Actually, Next is built on top of Express. Yeah.
And what about like serverless functions? Are those supported on this platform or?
So, I mean, this platform is serverless. So you don't really need the concept of a serverless function, but like in your Next app, if you create a API endpoint, that serves as your serverless function at that point.
Got it. Okay.
All right, so let's see. So there's another component to the platform, which are builds. So every time that we pull your code down, we run a build. Whenever that build runs, you could get an error. Maybe you forgot to add something to your package JSON or something like that. So whenever you run it in our environment, it doesn't build like you expected it to. So this is where you would be able to see the output of those builds and see any errors that you might have gotten and fix those. And then there's a process that happens whenever we pull your code down. So we pull your code down from GitHub, then we run npm install, and then we run npm run wpe-build. So this is your chance to do anything that you need to do at build time for your app. If you can imagine, if you know anything about Gatsby, Gatsby is a static site generator. So this is where you would run Gatsby build, which would generate all of your static pages for your site. And then it would put them in the public folder for Gatsby, or in Next, there's Next build, and any of your static pages there will be built into the .next folder, and that'll end up as part of your site. And then whenever we actually run it, so we run npm start. So that's kind of the process of how your code gets from GitHub to the platform, built, and then running. All right, this not gonna do questions right now because we just kind of went over everything, but now let's jump into some code, unless there's any questions before I jump in.
Looks like you're clear right now.
All right, all clear, sweet. Let's see. I think you guys might only be able to see my browser right now, but we'll see. Let me pull up VS Code. Can you guys see VS Code?
No.
All right. I'll fix that. Let me try that real quick. It's not showing me my window. Just, oh, I'm used to having a lot of screens. And I'm like, wait, it's the first one. All right, cool. Okay, so you should be able to see everything now. So
I think is VS Code behind that window?
Yeah, VS Code.
Okay.
Back here now.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Yeah. All right, so the first thing I want to tell you is that our docs for our headless environment are actually public right now. So if you want to go check them out and see how the platform works, you can do that. They're public because we're currently in alpha, so we're accepting alpha customers to come use the platform and mess around with it before it's live. So if you're interested or you have a real project that you want to do, we definitely would love to hear about that. And you can hit me up on GitHub or Twitter. But if you come out, it's our WP Engine headless-docs repository. And then there's this getting started guide to walk you through creating your first headless app on WP Engine. So what we're going to do is go ahead and deploy an app. And then I'm going to show you a couple other apps that I've written and show you some different things that we're working on to make WordPress great for headless. All right. So right now, the way that you interact with the platform is through a CLI. So I'll just kind of show you this. So I'm going to say WP Alpha Apps List. You'll be able to see all of the apps that I have deployed to the platform. I have my personal site that I'm kind of working on, a demo site, and then this developer hub, which we're going to have a developer site at WP Engine. We're just going to have all of our headless documentation, and I'll be working on tutorials and videos and blogs and everything related to best practices around headless, and a lot of that will be going there. So I've been working on that. But now let's pull up one of these apps. So I'm going to pull up my personal one. And you'll see that I have one environment. I just have the production environment. It gives me my URL to that environment, so I can go pull that up. The state that I'm in deployed, the ID for the environment, and then it tells me also what git commit has been deployed to that environment. So I can go see what's actually running out there. I can go check it out here. And let's pull this up and see what it looks like. So I'll run this. This is, right now we got a cold start because it's not actually production, but when we're in production, these sites will be hot all the time and you won't have this cold start that happens. All right. All right, so this is a site that I've been working on to kind of take advantage of some of the things that you can do in Headless. I've got a custom post type here that I'm pulling in different videos that I have on YouTube, and then I'm enriching that content through the YouTube API to show how many views each video has and how many likes it has. And then I have this total that I'm pushing up here. So we're going to look a little bit deeper into this site and how it works in a little bit. But I also have all of my blog posts here. So if I click on it, it goes out, pulls that blog, and you can see that as we click around here, it's super fast. There's a little delay to pulling in some of these videos because those are, I call it YouTube API whenever those are pulled up, but you'll notice that the site's really fast. All right, so let's see how you might build and deploy a site like this at WP Engine. So let's go ahead and create one from scratch. All right, so I have just a brand new directory. There's nothing in here. And we're just gonna create a little Next app. So I'm npm init, then I'm gonna npm install Next, React. Live coding is fun, so let's see what happens.
Mostly people are used to me live coding and just watching me butcher everything, so it's totally fine.
So I cut my finger tonight. I have this Band-Aid on my finger.
Oh, you actually butchered yourself.
Yeah, I actually literally did.
Yeah.
All right, so it's installing Next, React, React DOM. This is just some dependencies that we'll have for our app.
Is there a version? Is there a version of Node that you guys do support, or like, is it all the latest ones, or?
It's all the latest ones. So it's anything above 12, I think, 10 or 12. I forget what the minimum is, but you can put in your engine's property and package JSON. You can specify what engine if you have one specific that you need to target. I'll show you what I mean by that real quick. So if we come over here, the supported apps, you can specify in your package JSON what node environment you expect.
Okay.
All right, so that installed that. I'm also going to do TypeScript. So I only use TypeScript these days. I'm just going to install these as developer dependencies. All right. Let's pull this up in VS Code. All right, so if you've never used Next, then I'll just walk through a little bit how this works. I'm going to create a folder called Pages. And the nice thing about Next is if you've used React but not Next, when you use React, you have to install things like a React router, and you have to do a lot of the heavy lifting yourself. Next takes a lot of that out of the equation and makes everything a little bit simpler, I think. So if all my routing is based on where I put my React components in the Pages directory. So an index is going to be my root to my app. And I'm just going to create the most advanced React component you've ever seen. All right, and that's it. Now if I go and I run, I need to add some stuff to my package JSON. I remember what all this is. Let me pull this up from here. So there's some scripts that Next has for you to run your apps. There's one for building your app, your dev, so Next dev. And then I have my wp-build script in here. This is what I was telling you. Whenever we pull your code down, we npm install, and then we run wp-build. So I'm going to just run the standard build script from Next, which is Next build. Then on npm start, I've got to run it on port 8080 for the platform. So I just say Next start and then tell it what port it needs to be on. And we'll go ahead and just run this locally. So I'm going to say npm run dev, and that is going to go build my project. And that simply, I should end up on localhost with a very, very basic Next app. And there it is. All right, so my app is running. This has nothing to do with WordPress right now, by the way, and I don't want to go into that because I would have to hook up a bunch of things from scratch that I don't want to try to do in front of you and stumble all over myself. But you can imagine that in our app now in VS Code that we would go and, in our component, we would pull back posts, show a list of posts. And when I click one, I want to show the whole post. That would be how we would connect this to WordPress. There's nothing special there. We're just going to call the REST API from our components. But what I want to show you is how we can get this Next app running on the WP Engine platform. So let's go ahead and do that. one thing I want to do is create a get ignore file. So I don't want to check in my node modules and all of that. Or .NET folder. So you notice whenever we built, this .NET folder was created. I don't want to check that into GitHub. But this is where static files will be generated and everything that Net serves up from the server. And I'm also going to create a wp.json file, which is how we're going to deploy this out. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new file in here, wp.json. Then I'll go back up to our trusty documentation, wherever that is. And I'm going to copy this just simple config file. And we'll name this the OC Meetup demo. Then I'm going to add this to a repo. So we'll do Matt-Landers /OC Meetup demo. We'll just call it the same thing. And I'll hook it up to a dev branch. This is where I got to tell it my WordPress environment name. And this is a WP Engine specific thing. So I need to tell my app what WordPress environment I want this to be associated to. And we're only doing that right now for authorization to make sure you're authorized to create an app on our platform. So you have to have a site on our platform. So I'm just going to add that there. And this is where I would put my secrets. I'm not going to use a secret for this, but I'll just leave this simple one here. All right. So now what I need to do is add this beautiful app to GitHub, and I called it OC Meetup Demo, I think, hopefully. I can make this private, and then I'll just create the repo. And then I'm going to just run all of these commands. I'm going to need this. It's got to get set up Git on here. So just get init, Git add, Git commit. And then I want to get remote. I want to add that remote. And then I guess I need to create a branch. So and then we want to get push. All right, so I'm pushing this code up to GitHub. Just gonna make sure everything is cool over here. All right, so we have a dev branch in GitHub. So everything's here. I just need this to be here so the platform can go and pull that code. So let's do that. All right, so the first thing I need to do is let the platform have access to this repository. And we have a way to connect to GitHub, and it'll pull up all of your everything that you have access to in GitHub, and then you can just choose the specific repository that you want to give it access to. So I've given it access to some here, but I'm going to do the OC Meetup demo and save it. And I'll go back to my command line, and then I just run wpe alpha apps create -f wp.json. So that's that file that we created. And that's going to go out to the platform and create the app. So you can see when it comes back, it just returns me back my app name, which I need in order to pull this up. So when I go and get this, what we're going to notice is that we're building the code. So the platform has gone out and pulled down the code from that commit here. And now it's building. So that's the state that we're in. So this will take a few minutes to run. And then when it's done, it'll say that it's deployed and we'll get a URL that we can use to go view that. So I went through a lot of stuff right there. And while we're waiting for it to deploy, maybe this is a good time to take some questions if you have any.
What you had mentioned that there's different environments from the like the Node apps that you're building. Is that, I mean, here it's just production, but will it just generate random URLs every time, or how does that sort of connect to, let's say, a production URL or a development URL that, you know, like somebody as a developer can go send to a client to go, here, check this out?
Right. So once the URL is generated, it doesn't change anymore. So then you can use that URL to share with whoever you need to. For your production URLs, you'll be able to connect custom domains up to this platform. Right now in the alpha, we don't have custom domains enabled yet, but before we go live, we'll definitely gonna need that.
Yeah. And so the so is it similar to how, like right now, if you create an install on WP Engine, it's, you know, some environment name .wpengine.com. Is it similar to that, where the names here are tied to that you know, temporary domain, or is it just a randomly generated one?
It's a randomly generated one, so you don't choose that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Adam's asking if the WP CLI is only available on Mac, or is there a way to install it on Linux?
We're working on getting that into NPM, and we'll have all the different variations. But
okay,
if you get into the alpha and you need a Linux one, I can get it to you.
Sounds good.
I use Windows most of the time, mainly because I game, so don't judge me.
No judgment here.
So just check this. This usually the first time that this builds usually takes a few minutes. So any other questions about what's happening here?
Nothing in the chat just yet. You had talked, I don't know the flow of your presentation, I don't want to mess it up, but if there's other examples of things that you've worked on, like I think the original time I saw this was in one of the summit presentations. Maybe it was last year, not this year, when it was just like, you know, when you had just created it with Json, and you guys were like, we're really excited about this. I don't know what's going to be, but this is what it is right now. And so like, are there anything that you've, that you can share, obviously, that you guys have been working on WP Engine for this?
Oh yeah, so right now we've mainly been working on the hosting, but we're definitely gonna work on other things that will make WordPress a good headless CMS. I'm gonna demo something to you in a minute for one of the common problems that you have whenever you go headless, and that is that previewing your post is pretty hard, because right now, if you go hit the REST API, you know, you're only gonna be able to pull back whatever you're authenticated to. And whenever you do that from your front end, you're not authenticated to anything because you're on a different domain than your WordPress site is on. And so you're not sharing your cookie between those. So when I call GraphQL or the REST API, it's just gonna give me whatever an unauthenticated user could get. So getting previews is kind of a challenge, but I'm going to demo something we've been working on for that. And then I've been building other sites where I have custom content types, like those videos that I was showing you. And we're going to work on making that experience better whenever you do have custom content types and other things that you can imagine might be issues in the headless world. But we're definitely committed to making WordPress really great for headless.
Yeah.
Headless sites.
I think one of the things, like I think Jacob mentioned, he does a lot with Gatsby for Zeek, and we were at a Gatsby conference last year or the year before. I don't remember when it was, but you know, with them, previews was an issue. Like everybody was kind of complaining about that at the time, being, you know, you can't see your previews. But what what is the benefit really? Like, what are you guys doing to like make it a real positive experience for people who are hosted on WP Engine? Obviously, like if you're already hosted there and not having to use like a Netlify or Zeit or something like that to host your Node app, like what is the benefit of having everything together on a single platform?
Well, I think a lot of people, what they want is not, so a lot of the customers that we work with are doing headless or agencies. And usually they'll build a site and then they turn that site over to the customer at some point. And you can imagine that at WP Engine, we make that really easy. We have a way to transfer a site from one account to another. It's super simple. But you can imagine how that gets complicated when you have multiple accounts that you have to transfer over. So now it's like, here's your WP Engine account, and here's your AWS account or Netlify or whatever, wherever you want to host that. So that's one of the main use cases that we see. Also, this is a way to have your front end hosted as close as possible to your back end. So typically that's something that you would want to do. So we're going to have these clusters located close to where our WordPress clusters are. And then we'll be doing other things to, improve the experience whenever you have all these things in one with the same platform as well.
Cool.
All right, so this actually deployed, and now it's given this URL here that we can go put into the browser. And there it is. We now have these where they don't cold start. My other one was deployed a while ago. So you saw how fast that came up. It was pretty much immediately. And you'll notice too that we also have SSL. So we've already got a certificate on here from Cloudflare. That's from WP Engine powered, but it'll also work whenever you have your custom domain will automatically have SSL installed as well. All right, so that's cool. It's not a super great demo because now we're just running a Node app. We're not doing anything with WordPress, but you can see how simple that is to deploy something. So now you may be thinking, okay, now I want to go update the site. How does that work? Well, I'm done with using the CLI at that point. I can just go back to my code and make a change. So let's say that I want to say, hello, OC Meetup. I just save that. Then I just check this in. So now push it. Now, if I go and pull that up, what we'll see is that the platform has recognized that we've made a change to our code into that branch, and then it pulls down the code and starts to build it. So we have one commit that is currently running and deployed here. We have another commit here that is actually being built right now. So it's running through that whole process again, but the site will stay up until the new one is built and deployed. So that'll take a few minutes like before, but once it's done, it'll just automatically be running. So I don't have to do anything with the platform anymore. It's just got this continuously deploying based on whenever I'm changing my code. So you can imagine in like a real development environment where you have a lot of developers that you might not be checking straight into production or like to the main branch, which might be your production environment. So you could see that you might have a feature branch where then you create a pull request to merge your changes into the main branch. And then we'll still recognize, even though there was a PR to merge them in, we'll know that that happened, and then we'll pull it down at that time rather than checking in and pushing directly to that branch. We'll know anytime that branch changes, however that happens, whether you push directly to it or merge through a PR or whatnot.
There was another question that came in from Andre, which is, other than the build, do you keep this to yourself, or how will it affect working with the client when you hand it off to them? I think, Andre, feel free to jump in here and ask your question. Maybe I'm not getting it correctly, but
I'm not sure I'm following.
Yeah, let's see. Maybe it's related to the code base. Andre, if you want to unmute yourself, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, you're going to hear me, right?
Yes.
I guess the confusing part is that this is pretty understandable for me. And once the build happens, you have, your page is delivered. That's what's happening, right?
Yeah, once the builds happen, it's running out on our servers.
Right. So when you hand off, let's say, the website that you've built or the pages that you built to a client, do they need to know any of this stuff, or is it just like they can't touch their website?
Yeah, they don't need to know any of this stuff.
Okay.
It depends on the client. Like if you're turning it over to the client's dev team, then you would be able to transfer access to this headless app to their dev team. But if you're just turning it over as in like, hey, I'm done with your site, now it works, then no, there's nothing.
And typically in this kind of a workflow, especially connecting to WordPress as sort of your content source, right? They're going to continue creating posts or pages or things like that. And you will have written the logic in your next app to be able to display that kind of content. So client will still use WordPress as they normally would have, similar to how they normally would have. And then it would, push the content into this app, right?
Right. Okay. It might make a little more sense on this next demo where we're actually going to talk to WordPress. So let's do that real quick. All right, so you can see that everything was deployed. So now I refresh that URL and now my changes are updated and we're all good to go. All right, so that's how the platform works in general. Now let's just talk a little bit about Headless WordPress. This won't necessarily be about our platform, but just some things that we're working on. So let me spin up a different site real quick. I won't, let's see, let's do this one. So I'm just going to run it locally and then I'll walk you through some of how it works. Let me actually open this up. So this is a site we just started working on to host our documentation and be where we post our blogs and everything related to Headless. So let's take a look at it. We haven't worked on the design yet, but a little bit about how this is working, which is kind of cool. If I click on documentation, this actually pulls in the documentation from GitHub. So that's where we edit it. We can edit our documentation in GitHub, and then this site actually pulls down the markdown and everything from GitHub and allows me to navigate it here. So that's not necessarily anything to do with WordPress either, but it's kind of cool that we're able to use GitHub kind of as our documentation hub. And if I go to the blog, I'm pulling in blogs from a WordPress environment. And right now you can just see hello world. But let's look at something that we've been working on for previews. So if I go to this WordPress site, I'll run you through a little bit about how all this is working. This isn't the right site. This is their site. Yeah, this is the site. All right, so I have some plugins that we're using. We're using WP GraphQL. So instead of using the REST API, we're using GraphQL. We have advanced custom fields, custom post types, and then a plugin for WP GraphQL to allow you to pull custom post types through the GraphQL API interface. Then another thing that we've been working on is this WP Authentication Code plugin, which that will not be the final plugin name. Or probably some kind of generic headless plugin from WP Engine. But my team's been working on this to figure out how we could do previews. So if you think about a preview, you have to be authenticated to pull that post up. And that's kind of a pain to do on the front end. We somehow have to get the user's context into a request that we're going to make to GraphQL. If you were to do it from like a theme in WordPress, it'd be fine because it can use the session cookie and everything to authenticate with WordPress. So WordPress knows what user is actually making this request. But since we're on different domains, our WordPress box is on a different domain than our front end. So like in this case, my WordPress is on wpdeveloperhub.wpengine.com. But my front end is actually on, right now I'm localhost, where we were running it. I don't know where I had that running. Here, get these closer together. So when I make the GraphQL call, I can't see any previews here. All right, so if I go to my post, you'll see I actually do have a preview draft that I'm working on. We put a lot of effort into this post. It just says preview testing. But you notice that that's not showing up on the site here. I got this like zoom bar in the way, and it's really driving me good. As I can move this.
I don't think I've ever had a Zoom call where that bar did not go
Oh, that
away.
bar is so annoying. All right, so I have this preview post. It's not showing up on our site in the blog. But now I want to preview it because before I publish it, I want to see what it looks like on the front end. So if I come over here and now I have the like other thing in my way. And I click the preview, I can click the preview a new tab link. And you'll notice at the bottom, the URL is localhost:3000 there. So we rewrote that URL to where your front end actually lives. And when I click on it, it goes through this authentication workflow, and then there's my preview. Like I didn't have to log in, didn't have to do anything. Like it just works, which is awesome. So now you may be thinking, like, if you've tried to do this before, you're thinking, what kind of magic was that? And the cool thing about the way that we've done it is that this will work with any framework or platform. So I know if you've used Frontity before, they have a way to do previews, but this will actually work with Next or any other platform or any other framework. So let me show you some things in WordPress of what makes this actually work. So you'll notice the preview here too at the bottom. I don't know if you can see it, but it also says localhost. So we've rewritten all of these preview links to make sure they go to the right place. So we go to our settings in general. We added some settings down here for the Authentication Codes plugin. We have a secret, and we also have a base URL for where our blog posts live, and that tells the plugin how to rewrite that URL for the previews. So that's why I have localhost 3000 here. You can imagine that if this were a production environment, that would point to like your domain, like mattlanders.com or whatever the actual domain is, and it'll rewrite the preview links to whatever you put in here. This API secret can be used on your node side. So on the node server, I use this secret to go through an OAuth authentication flow, which we've built into that plugin. So what happens is, whenever I click on one of these preview links, if I click this link, you don't see it because it happens so fast. But what happens is that the browser, if it's not logged in, like if it doesn't have a token to make that GraphQL call with, it redirects you over to WordPress, which since you're already logged into WordPress, since I open that up in a new tab, you don't even see this happening, but it actually redirects you to WordPress. It gives you a short-lived code that and then redirects you back to your front end. The node server takes that code and pairs it with the API secret and passes that back to WordPress through an API endpoint that we have through the plugin. And then that URL will return an access token that then you can store in the browser, like in local storage or in a cookie, and use that in the authorization header for any requests that you make to GraphQL or the REST API. So then any requests that we make will be authenticated, and we can go get things like the preview post that requires you to be authenticated. And it kind of assumes the role of that user. So whatever that user has access to, whenever that redirect happens, is what they'll have access to with that access token. So while I'm showing this with previews, you can imagine a scenario where you want to leave a comment or you have a forum or whatever. This will work for that as well. So it's a pretty cool thing that we're working on. It's not live yet. We haven't pushed this out, but we're going to be pushing this out pretty soon. Working through the internal WP Engine processes to get this reviewed and make sure everything's cool before we open source it and put it out there for everybody to start using.
I know it looks like you click the preview button and then you see a preview. Like that seems like such a simple thing, but it is not a simple thing. Like it's a very complicated problem that everybody who's doing headless seems to be having issues with. So
Matt, is this only for previewing posts, or is it for any authenticated API call?
This will work for any authenticated preview API call. Okay. So once you get that access token, you can use it to go make a comment as that user or whatever you have in WordPress, it'll work.
And so if I had a Node app, I don't know, like an Android app or something, my user would have the same scope on the app as they would on the WordPress site.
That's right.
Right. Okay. So it's not like OAuth. It's like application passwords.
Well, it's like OAuth in the sense like of the user scope essentially.
But the user scope is whatever the internal WordPress user scope is.
Right. Yes.
Right. Okay.
Yeah,
so if I was an editor,
that is your scope, right?
Right. Okay. Cool.
Yeah, it's like application passwords.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
So it's pretty neat. That's something that we'll be releasing in the next, hopefully, as soon as they will let me. But it works, as you can see. But this is really cool too of what we've paired with it. So it's actually really complicated to get, like, it's surprisingly complicated to make this stuff work in WordPress headlessly. But there's another piece to this too. So if I come in here and I just start typing like a new line, WordPress creates revisions. So it's not like I'm just pulling up a post. There's like history of that post and all the changes that have happened. And we wrote this to just continue to work. So if I pull this up, you see that new line shows up. So we know how to view this ID that WordPress gives you and pull out the revisions, pull out whatever you're clicking on there. So let me show you a little bit about what I mean there. I'm going to pull up this site in VS Code. And I'll show you how this works. All right, so there's a little bit to this. So the one thing that you've got to set up whenever that redirect happens, you need to have an endpoint on the node side where you can do that secret exchange. So I don't want my secret from WordPress that you saw in the settings to end up in the browser, because then that would be very bad, because anybody could just go impersonate a user at that point or trade in a code for a access token, and we don't want that, just like any other OAuth scenario. So what we've done is we've created this npm package, which isn't live yet, so don't try to install WP API. That's definitely not what it'll be called. We just have that for how it's working here. But it provides some built-in middleware. So I just call this config here with the base URL and the secret. So that secret that I had from WordPress. And then it gives me a authorize method, which will do all of that token exchange for me. So I don't have to code that at all. This just magically happens. And this will work with Express. Right now, we're going to create other ones for other frameworks as well. Or you could just go build it yourself if you had some custom backend framework you're using. And then whenever I want to actually go pull data out of WordPress, I need to add that authorization header and everything in there if I were going to do this myself. But we also have, let's see, where am I? If I go to the blog, we also have some other helper functions for React in here. So we have some hooks, some React hooks for us to go get posts. So instead of me having to go do a GraphQL call or whatnot, which I could show an example of that, but I think you guys had that meeting last week about GraphQL, but you can notice here I'm not doing anything with GraphQL. I just pull this directly out of this library that we have. just say use posts, and then it knows how to go talk to WordPress, pull back all the posts, and put them in this variable for me, this object, and then I can just list them. And the same thing works for individual posts to pull back the content. So I have another hook here called use post where I pass in the slug. So whenever I click on a link, it passes the slug in, or whenever I rewrite the preview link in WordPress, that also kind of comes through as a slug, and that'll get passed in here. And then we know how to interpret that slug into whatever it is. So if it's a revision, we'll parse everything and we'll make sure we pull the right revision. If it's a post, like an actual post that's published, it'll pull that down, and you don't have to worry about any of that. It just comes back for you, and then you display it in React. It's a lot of like magic that's happening there, but I'd be curious if anybody has any questions or anything about how that works.
No, that definitely looks like black magic. There aren't any questions there. There are a couple other questions that are around this topic.
Okay.
And so one of them may be a little more general question, which is differences between the REST API versus GraphQL, and why would you prefer GraphQL over REST API, and why is REST API a little slower process?
Yeah, so the REST API for WordPress is not my favorite REST API that I've ever worked with, let's say. But if you use it directly out of the box, you just go to like wp-json v2 posts, it pulls back like everything. Like it's a massive object that gets pulled back. So you get, you know, by default, you get the excerpt, you get the title, you get the slug, you get the actual entire post. So imagine you're on the home page where you just want to show a list of all the posts, but not the actual content. If you just call the API directly, it's going to pull back all the content, but you didn't need all that. You just needed the title maybe, or, you know, the excerpt. Now there are ways with the REST API to pull back only the fields that you want, but it's not a great experience, and you're having to code all that yourself. You're also having to keep track of all the different endpoints. So if I want to get posts, that's one endpoint. If I want to get comments, that's a different endpoint. You know, you have all of these different endpoints whenever you're dealing with REST. With GraphQL, you get one endpoint. And then through that endpoint, I can query whatever I want out of WordPress. So I can say, like, I only want to get the title and the slug and the excerpt, and that's all that's going to come back in my object from WordPress. So let me show that a little bit. So if I go over back to WordPress, I have this GraphQL IDE that I'll pull up. And let's just take this example here. And this is cool. So whenever you install WP GraphQL, you get this. I know you guys already did a thing on this, but since somebody asked, I'm just going to show it.
Yeah.
So here I can pull back only the data that I want. So you can see that I say I want to get posts, and then I only want to get title and URI. And that's all that comes back. If I wanted to get the slug, I would just put the slug here, and then it comes back. So that's one of the reasons that I like GraphQL. As far from a WordPress standpoint, I just think it's a much cleaner API interface than the REST API. But there's nothing wrong with you using the REST API. Everything that I showed you, you could do with the REST API. It's just really a preference, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. The next question, which again, I'm not 100% on this one, is so the question is, so is it cloaking your site where WordPress is sitting / hosting? I think that's like the front end, which is the headless piece. Obviously that's, you know, a separate entity, but it's pulling data from the WordPress side of things. What does the WordPress side of things look like? That, you know, that actual front end of the WordPress side.
Yeah, so part of what that plugin that we have is going to do is turn off the front end of your WordPress site, because you don't want to have your node site running on your main.com and then your WordPress site also rendering the same content on some other URL. You don't want the search engines to get confused about what's what. But right now, if I went to that site, it's just the default plugin. So if I like our default site, and it just shows this.
Okay.
Oh, I guess that's not the default. I installed one of our Genesis themes on here, but it's just, but this, you wouldn't want this to be here. So don't do this. This is bad. You want to turn off your front end, and we're going to do that through the plugin as well, to where if you go to any URL that's on the front end, that's not the API or any other URLs that you want to be able to get to, like if you like that plugin that I have that I created, or that we did that preview stuff for, it has some URLs. So you wouldn't want to block those, but we want to block any of the front end rendering URLs on the WordPress side.
All right.
So I don't know if that's cloaking per se, but your site becomes your node site. Like that is your site. WordPress just becomes your data store for all your data.
Yeah. Hopefully that answers your question, Andre. If it doesn't, feel free to jump in.
Any other questions or anything you want to see? That's really it. It's from a demo perspective. I think that's all that I have, but I'm totally open to just.
Matt, is there anything for delivering the tokens to the users, or maybe this is a feature request, because I think that's the next thing that we need as developers. So it's going to be up to the developer to maybe like email the tokens and confirm them that way. That's still off of this plugin, right?
No, the users don't need anything.
Well, if I was making an app to use this plugin, and I wanted to make a headless app and I wanted to use this configuration, I would still have to be able to verify. I'm gonna have to give the users a secret, right? At some point.
No, you wouldn't want to do that. That'd be bad. It goes through a normal OAuth flow. So you would have to do it through a web view. So basically they would, you're talking about in a native app, right?
A native app or a native app or a web app, either one.
Yeah, I mean, a web app I just did. So that happens, that's easier because, so you can't give the users the secret, like anybody. They can't know that thing exists. On the web,
I see. Okay, so the user doesn't ever authorize themselves. This is totally on the back end.
They're authorizing themselves on the WordPress side.
Right,
so
okay.
if I had opened that in a, like in a incognito window, WordPress would have asked me to put in my username and password. But since I was already logged in through the browser, it didn't have to ask me my username and password.
And if I was using a two-factor auth on my WordPress site, that wouldn't affect that at all. It would just.
No, you would just need to do the two-factor when you log in. And then once you log in, we, through the plugin, generate that access token that then you can trade out.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Yeah, and we'll have documentation and everything on that, on how to do it. And I should probably create a native app on doing it as well and just make sure all that's cool.
Awesome.
And that would be the case, like, let's say you're running a membership site, or some kind of a store where you want people to log in and see their orders or something like that. You could use the same kind of functionality there.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Eric was asking well, I'm going to extrapolate here a little bit. His question is, how does it work with WooCommerce? I think the answer is, how are you going to build it to work with WooCommerce? Because you basically have to write all that code yourself, right? But have you seen any WooCommerce sites start to use Headless in this way?
Yeah, we're looking at that as well. We think that that's a good way to probably scale WooCommerce more than you can today. So as far as that plugin goes, I don't see, if there's WooCommerce APIs, it should work just like any other API from WordPress. But we don't have anything specific around Headless WooCommerce yet, but you can imagine that that's something we might want to look into.
Right. And just spoiler alert, we will be having a talk about Headless WooCommerce coming up. I think it's in January by Jacob. who is in the chat. So feel free to drop him all your questions.
Cool.
Any other questions for Matt while we've got him here?
Hey, Matt, it's Tom here. How far away are you from like releasing this to the public?
Yeah, so we'll be releasing the hosting platform to the public early 2021. I don't want to give the exact date because I don't know what I'm allowed to say, but we do have a date. We have a date that we're targeting, but it is early 2021.
So early 2021. Mm-hmm. So and then any clues on what the pricing might be for this?
We haven't released any of that yet, but it won't be priced like our existing hosting product since it's serverless. Which I don't have any details on that yet.
Okay, fair enough. Thanks.
I will say that it's an enterprise product for now, so we're expecting this to be in more of like a high-end use case.
Gotcha.
You know, we don't expect, if you just have a blog, like a personal blog, we don't expect you to be using Headless for that since it's not a great use case for Headless right now.
Right.
But as we build more into the WordPress Headless ecosystem, you can see how that might be more of a use case we'd want to support.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks.
Also, I think you mentioned, Matt, that if anybody's interested in being part of the alpha for the Headless program, they could reach out to you there. So if there is anybody listening who is interested to see what else is available here and test it out, then definitely get in touch with Matt.
Yeah, if you want to get on the platform and play around and have like if you have a site that you want to deploy, for sure, let me know, or not, or a site for a customer that you're working on or one that you're doing yourself. We definitely want some of those real use cases for the initial alpha customers, but we'll have a limited availability coming up before we release as well, where you could get in on that too if you just wanted to like play around. Right now we have quite a few customers on the alpha that are testing it out and building some sites. So,
yeah,
we should be pumped about this. So.
Question,
for sure.
Unrelated, but does WP Engine AppNet offer design services?
We don't have any services, no. But you could. I don't know who you would contact, but we have partners that we work with that could probably point you in the direction of somebody.
Okay, I imagine just go through the standard sales channel for that.
Yeah, I think so. I wouldn't know. If you have a sales rep or a partner rep, that'd be where I'd start.
Okay, thanks.
Are you saying that because my design was so bad, or?
No, you nailed it. You were right on brand. You were aiming at developers and you had no design. It was perfect.
I even used monospace font.
That's right.
We're all developers here, so I need to find somebody.
Any other questions for Matt while we're here? Okay. Well, it's a couple hours ahead there for Matt. I know I have someone else from Dallas as well. So we don't want to keep you too long, but we really appreciate you coming by and showing us what WP Engine's working on for sure. And any places, I think you mentioned your Twitter handle, people get access to you. Any other places that people can find you?
Yeah, you can, I'll put them in chat, but you can get me on Twitter or matt.landers@wpengine.com, which I'll put in here. I didn't want to, well, I guess, yeah. In my Twitter. Yeah, so if you want to reach out to me, you got any questions about the demo or you want to get in the alpha program, just reach out and let me know.
Sounds good. All right, everybody, appreciate you coming out, and we will see you. Actually, I'm gonna drop my teaser for next month's meetup, which is going to be, like I said earlier, on the Frontity framework. So it's a React framework that is specifically focused on WordPress. So you can just use any headless platform put this React framework up, point it to any WordPress site on any host, and it will just start pulling in your content. They've got a bunch of new packages that have come out recently to give it additional functionality around different plugins and things like that. So less building from the ground up and more sort of like customizing sort of in a similar workflow that you might be familiar with from a theme development standpoint. So they'll be here to talk to us about that next month. So hope to see you then.
All right. Thanks for having me out.
All right. Thanks, Matt.
All right. See ya.
Good night, everybody.
Yeah.